Hi everybody, welcome back to the Country Clucker. My name is Noelle. I am a backyard chicken keeper. I am a writer, blogger, published author within the backyard niche, and I have been doing this for 12 years. Well, this is video number 2 of my mini-series that I'm going to be going through on winterizing and overwintering a flock of chickens in the backyard, because they're going to be outside. They're not going to be like in a controlled environment like other chickens would be. So the things that we need to do for our chickens are a little bit different than what would happen on a mass scale. So my last video, I walked you through the process of winterizing my Country Clucker coop, which is my largest coop, and I went through the supplies, the procedure, and a little bit of why I'm doing what I'm doing for my chickens. And of course I have like 5 coops in the backyard, so the rest of them got wrapped, but I just focused on that one for the video because it's my largest, and I figure it would just be most beneficial for my followers out there. So if you have just run across me, it's nice to meet you. Hi. I've been actively working within the backyard chicken movement for the past decade. Some of my work includes writing for magazines, for hobby farm magazines. I'm also active in the political area of achieving pet status for backyard chickens, because often our backyard chicken keepers are kind of left in a world of between two worlds of your traditional cat, dog pets that have veterinarians that you take them to, and the other world of livestock vets, which are very, very expensive, because mostly those veterinarians have to do house calls simply because their clients are so big, your horses, your cows, and so forth, which leaves backyard chickens kind of in the middle between those two worlds. And although the backyard chicken movement is exploding, and backyard chickens are very quickly becoming recognized more as pets versus production, there's still a lot of work to do in order to give the backyard chicken keeper the resources that they need. And this is where I came into place, because I saw this hole, I saw this niche. I've got an academic background in both astronomy, psychology, paleontology, and so I have the skills and the ability to kind of reach into some of these areas and hopefully put forth content that can help backyard chicken keepers like yourself who are finding yourselves a little bit of no man's land. So that's where I come in. So I just want to say hi, it's good to meet you, and for those that have been following me for my entire journey, I want to thank you again, because it's your support that allows me to help you and other chicken keepers. So normally I am outside in the backyard with my chickens, so this is my home office that's behind me here. It's a little bit of a concoction of dinosaurs, books, dragons. I'm a writer, so I work from home, so this is where I spend the majority of my time if I'm not in the backyard playing with the chickens. So the second video that I'm going to talk about is overwintering your flock. So last time I talked about the winterizing of a chicken coop. Okay, so this is what you do to the coop and to the habitat in order to keep your chickens comfortable. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about the overwintering of your flock and the specific needs of the chickens as individuals and as a collective whole. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to lead off with is the piece of advice that I wish I had when I first started doing this, and the things I have learned over the past decades and change, is the worst mistake that a chicken keeper can make is judging your flock's comfort level by your own. Okay, this is what I mean by that. Typically, our companion animals, cats, dogs, generally gravitate towards the same habitat and comfort levels as humans do, which is why they make great pets. You can bring them inside. They acclimate very well to the indoor environment most of the time, and they enjoy the same kind of habitat that you do, which is indoors, climate controlled, so you're able to choose your own comfort level based on what is going on outdoors, and our cats and our dogs are very, very easily acclimated to that, and it's not a big problem because this is why they make great pets. Chickens, on the other hand, are completely different. So chicken keepers who are new to the hobby, who have this as a background working knowledge, often try to replicate this exact scenario outside in the coop, and it causes problems, and I'm going to go through why. So I've got my handy dandy little notebook here, so if you see me rifling through pages, that's what I'm doing. But first, coffee. Okay, let's start with the physiology of a chicken. So this is the chicken's body, this is the chicken's mechanism and metabolism. Number one, chickens are wearing down coats, factory installed. So those same coats that we put on when the mercury gets below a certain level, you get ready to go outside, what do? You put on a coat. Why? Because you need insulation. And what is in that coat? Insulation, whether it be down feathers or polyester packing, whatever it is, anything that's going to hold heat next to your body to keep you warmer against the outside temperatures outside, so that way you can keep a hydrostatic equilibrium with your temperature so you can be outside longer. This is what chickens are already wearing factory installed. So when chickens go through molt, by now, this is what, mid-November, end of November? Oh my gosh, okay, wow. Okay, so end of November, sorry, time just, reality check. Okay, so by the end of November, going into the beginning of winter, or early winter, most of the backyard chicken flocks, give or take a few, have generally completed molt. You might have a few members that are still kind of pin-cushiony, or a few members that still look a little bit, unkept feather-wise, but for the most part, the flock is through molt. Now, in addition to losing the old feathers and regrowing new feathers, during molt, they are also growing in their winter down. So you will notice that when you pick up your chickens, that they just feel a little bit more fluffier. That's because they are. That's because underneath those new feathers that they have grown, that look fabulous, by the way, by now, underneath that they have grown in their winter down. Now, during the process of growing in their winter down, they are naturally acclimating to the temperatures outside. So chickens live in different climates, and so nature basically allows the chicken to acclimate slowly to the cooling temperatures of winter, so that by the time winter gets here, like when we get the bitter winds, the bitter cold, the bitter precipitation, the girls are well and good. So as far as heat is concerned, you do not need to add any supplemental heat to your coop environment. In fact, it's detrimental, because this is what it does. As the chicken is going through molt, and as they are growing in their new feathers and their subsequent down feathers, if they are exposed to a warm environment, especially at night, when they're all cooped up inside, they are not going to grow in the down sufficient in order to withstand the winter conditions. So what you're doing when you put a heat lamp or some kind of radiant heat device in your coop during this time is, when they are acclimating to the temperatures outside, you are throwing in a variable that that nature is not able to work with, and I'll tell you why. So in winter, we are all very, especially in the Northern Hemisphere, we are all very familiar with the winter storms that do one of two things. One, they bring in bitter cold winds, they bring in bitter precipitation, and what else happens? Often the power is going to go out, right? So when you've got a winter storm for your area, what do? You start preparing for the power outage. Get your canned foods, get your water, things that you can do to survive for, a day or two, depending on how bad the winter storm is, till you can have access to power again. Now, as humans, we have something available to us that chickens don't, and that is the resources that we gravitate to when we find ourselves in a situation without the supplemental heat that we have become accustomed to. We put on heavier clothes. we start cuddling underneath a down blanket or a really thick thermal sleeping bag or blanket, and if we have it available, we will often heat liquids or heat dinners and then eat that in order to raise our core temperature, because we are very much endothermic creatures just like chickens are, except for one thing. This is not available to the chicken flock outside. It's kind of hard to put sweaters on your chickens. It's kind of hard to do these things that we often do to, you know, as creature comforts when we find ourselves in a situation without our supplemental eat, except for the chickens do not have this. So what happens? Well, you have a flock of chickens that have acclimated to a false environmental setting because they become dependent on the heat. And then you have chickens who have been warned by this heat that suddenly find themselves without their heat source. And several things happen. If the power outage is long enough, and if the temperatures are cold enough, some chickens can actually freeze to death. You can actually, I've had keepers call me and contact me about, you know, the power went out, you know, half my flock died because it's cold, what do I do? And in addition for sharing their sympathies, I also take that time to educate them as of why this happened and how they can avoid it in the future. So what I'm telling you guys now is the biggest mistake that a backyard chicken keeper can make is judging the flock's comfort based upon your own. Chickens, going back to their Coelosaurian ancestors in the mid to late Triassic, so yes, we're talking about dinosaurs here, they evolved to live in outdoor conditions, provided that they are able to acclimate to the winter conditions naturally. That means growing in the down feathers. That means taking in more calories. So you will also find that your chicken feed consumption will kind of increase in the winter because they're going to be eating a little bit more, because chickens are endothermic creatures, which means they make their own heat. And in addition, they have a very high metabolism, and their core body temperature is anywhere between 107 to 109 degrees Fahrenheit. For us, that would be fatal. If we were running a temperature of 107 to 109, oh my goodness, we are in such big trouble. But for a chicken, this is their natural core body temperature. So what they are, so chickens, you know, in essence, are little furnaces covered in down feathers. So they have a very high internal temperature. They are already wearing down coats, which allow them to trap that heat next to their skin where they need it in order to keep warm. And in order to maintain that hydrostatic equilibrium or that temperature equilibrium, they need to consume more calories. So as a chicken keeper, knowing these physiological aspects of the chicken, what do you need to do in order to overwinter your flock? I'm gonna get some coffee and I'll touch on that in just a second. Sorry, nothing comes before coffee, right? Okay. The thing that chickens need, a flock of chickens need in order to overwinter and survive the winter elements are two things. Actually, yeah, I'm gonna stick with these two and then I'll expand on that in just a second. Are a clean and dry environment to call home. In addition to water that is liquid and feed constantly available to them, because they're going to be eating a little bit more during the winter in order to keep those little furnaces stoked, they need a clean and dry place to call home. So this is why in my previous video, and for those of you who are just now catching on to me here, what I'll do is I'll link that video in the description so you can go back and you can watch that. That's why I was wrapping my coop, because this is what the plastic does. So I'm going to explain a little bit more of what I was doing outside in my video a couple days ago. One, that construction grade plastic, you can get it at most home improvement stores, farm and feed stores, often sell it. What it does is when you put that around your coop, you're creating a barrier. So one thing that can cause the biggest problem to a chicken flock is winds like those bitter winter winds that just race into the coop. That, and also precipitation. So we all know that when you get a lot of rain, what happens to your pen? It gets muddy, it gets wet. And if you have really cold temperatures outside, what happens to that mud in the pen? It freezes. So now you have not only a wet environment, but now you have a frozen wet environment, and it just gets nasty from there, right? So those that have been in that situation are going, what on earth can I do to keep this from getting this way? Put up a barrier. So the chickens, little furnaces, wearing down coats. The biggest problem for chickens is going to be those bitter winds that race into the coop, raise up their feathers, and they lose all that heat that they've worked so hard to maintain. So we all know what it's like to be walking outside, you know, we're in our coats and everything, and you just get that big gush of wind that no matter how much stuff you have on, you just get a chill, right? This is what happens to the chickens. So what they need in order for them to keep their warmth, to keep their body heat next to their skin with those down feathers, is they need an environment that is wind free, where they are protected from the winds. Now, chickens, when they're outside in the wild, if they don't have a coop that is protected from the winds, they'll find something. They'll find a corner, they'll find a bush, they'll find something in order to block that wind, so that way their feathers don't raise up and they lose all that heat that they have worked so hard to keep next to their body. So when you wrap your coop in that plastic, what you're doing is you are creating a wind barrier. So when you get that wind that races across the plains, or in our case, we live in East Tennessee next to the Smoky Mountains, those winds roll off the mountains and oh my goodness, it is bitter. So I put that plastic up, so when that winds come, it'll hit that plastic, but it will not enter the coop. The second thing that plastic does is it keeps the winter precipitation out of the pen. So it's winter, you're getting a snowstorm, you're getting an ice storm. If you have your plastic wrapped around the pen, all that precipitation is going to stay on the outside. So yeah, if you live in a winter enough climate, you may get snow drifts stacked next to your pen that are laying against that plastic. That is keeping that snow out of the pen, because that's going to make a mess for your chickens and your habitat will not be dry. And the third thing that, the third thing that this does is it makes cleaning your coops in the winter a whole lot easier. So if you've removed the wind, if you've put up a barrier for the precipitation, your pen floor is going to stay dry. So not only does this benefit your chickens because they now have a dry, clean environment to call home, but it is also going to make keeping your coop clean and dry so much easier on you. So not only do they benefit, but also you benefit, which is what we're looking for. Let's see what else I had here. Okay, another thing I'm going to touch on is the danger of heat lamps. So, hang on, coffee. So I have touched on the danger of using supplemental heat in either chicken's habitat. But another thing that I'm going to touch on is heat lamps. So it is conventional wisdom, pretty much starting in our grandparents' age. So if you're Gen X, which would be my grandparents, you're looking at 20s, 30s, 40s, that area. Heat lamps were pretty much used for everything. They were used as brooder lamps. They were used to keep the chickens warm in the winter. It was just everything. If you had a flock of chickens, you had to have 1, 2, 3, 4, depending on how large your flock is, heat lamps. And now we're talking about the big red bulbs. I know you guys have seen. I mean, they're starting to disappear, thankfully, because we have better, more appropriate, safer heating devices for our chicks, per se. But they're still out there. They're still around. People use them for other purposes. But yeah, the big red bulbs, they're 200 watts or 500 watts, but they're big and red, they're bright, and they just blast not only radiating heat, but light, so that black body radiation. Those. Okay, so that is what our grandparents use. So anything with chickens, you had to have a heat lamp, back up to heat lamp, and a back up to the back up to the backup, all these kind of, redundant systems. And so for some reason, this has carried on with the tradition to this age, despite the dangers. Now, back in the time of our grandparents, life was simpler, life was harder, and we know more information. We know the dangers of heat lamps, just like we would know the dangers of, other activities, other things that are, bad for your health, whatnot. Wear sunscreen. If you don't, you can get sunburn, get cancer, that kind of thing. But for some reason, people still carry on this tradition as truth, and they still utilize these heat lamps in their coops, and disaster ensues. Let me tell you why. So, in addition to already artificially heating the coop environment, which then disrupts the chicken's ability to adapt to winter conditions naturally, growing it down. What these heat lamps do is they create an intense fire hazard. So what you have in a chicken coop are basically kindling. You have dry shavings, you have dust, and you have feathers, all of which are very ignitable. So these heat lamps, now you're wondering, how can a heat lamp start a fire? Well, there's several ways that this can happen. One, there's really no good way to mount a heat lamp in an environment where there are flying creatures and not have it knocked down. So when it gets knocked down, if the bulb doesn't bust, what you're going to have is you're going to have the heat lamp now resting on this combustible material, and once it reaches a certain temperature, what happens? It begins to smoke, it ignites, and then you have a fire. Or at times, these heat lamps, these bulbs, they're very unstable. They are very hot. They radiate a lot of black body radiation, and they're kind of unstable, so they can explode. Kind of like the incandescent light bulbs. You can hardly buy those anymore unless you have lava lamps, which even I find them hard to buy. You'll know that when you turn on the light, those incandescent bulbs, and the bulb, it blows, it makes this big pop sound, and you have this big flash of light, and then the bulb, it dies, and you go, oh, okay, now I need to change the light bulb. Well, that's back in the day of incandescent lights, which you really can't buy anymore for your houses unless you look really hard. But those heat lamps are still incandescent, so they are not the LED or anything like that, so they still run on the basic mechanism of an incandescent light bulb, which those little montifilaments in there, when they reach the end of their life, they do pop, they do explode, there's a big flash of light, a big wave of heat, and sometimes when that happens, those bulbs can actually explode. So what you have is you have not only, the heat that is going to be dispersed into the chicken coop, kind of like a spontaneous type event, but you're also going to have sparks and electricity. And what happens when it hits the shavings? Yeah, it burns. So now, when you have a heat lamp that explodes in a coop, you will have a furious, you will have a fast, and you will have a complete fire that will ignite, consume everything, including your chickens. Now, every winter, thankfully it's getting less, but just about every winter I will have several people contact me asking for help, because the lamp that they had in their coop, there was a fire, either the chickens knocked it down or it exploded or something happened. And they woke up in the morning and their coop was burnt to cinders. And the worst case scenario is not so much that all the chickens died, but that you have survivors out of this event, because these chickens will be singed, their feathers will be just melted to their skin, and it's something that's you don't really want to experience, you know. And so not only are they asking for, you know, what do I do, what happened, what did I do wrong, but now they have these individuals who are very, very injured, who they're looking for help in order to, you know, treat their survivors. And a lot of times the situation really is untreatable, and the only advice that I can give them is, look, do you have a veterinarian? If you do, I would call them and see if they would euthanize your chicken for you, because they are going to be in an immense amount of pain, and the recovery is going to be brutal, if they even recover, and they're going to suffer. And so, and that's nothing that any pet owner wants to actually hear, is, look, your pet's terminally ill. The compassionate thing to do is to end the suffering. Call your vet, see if they can help you out. They may not treat chickens, but usually any veterinarian will humanely euthanize any animal that is brought in that is suffering, in which case is your chicken. So it's not so much the total and complete fires that wipe out everybody, including the coop and the pen. It's usually those that have surviving members, and those are the emails I hate to respond to, because I know what they're feeling. I mean, they're upset, they're destitute, they're completely lost, they're stunned. They've got these chickens in front of them that look half fried, because they are. And it is a situation that no chicken keeper wants to wake up to. So I'm gonna get off my soapbox now. But thankfully my soapbox will maybe save, you know, a few lives, chicken lives, and of course chicken keeper, you know, a lot of frustration. But heat lamps, don't go there, don't do it, period. And in addition, not only will it take out your coop, but if you have any other structures nearby, like a shed or your neighbor's house or a barn, yeah, you could be responsible for not only, you know, your chickens dying, but possibly damage to adjacent properties, or you could lose your shed or a barn, or if it's dry, you could pretty much light half the county on fire, because these coop fires are very complete, and they're very destructive, and they're hot. So yeah, heat lamps, don't want to go there. So the things you do for your chicken during the winter to overwinter your flock are: keep it simple. If you need electricity, you're probably doing too much, okay? Keep it simple. Put up the plastic. This is going to give you a wind barrier, and it is also going to give you a precipitation barrier. It'll keep the wind out of the coop. It'll reduce the drafts. It'll keep your chickens from having their feathers lifted up, and they lose all that heat that they've kept real close to their skin, so they got to start all over. And it will keep your coop and your pen, most importantly, clean and dry. The second thing you need to do, water. Make sure that your flock has drinkable liquid water at all times. Water helps them regulate their body temperature. I know it sounds weird, but a flock of chickens that does not have access to clean, drinkable liquid water during the winter will struggle. Third thing you're going to need is prepare to go through the chicken feed, because they're little furnaces. Their body temperatures run to about 107 to 109 degrees Fahrenheit. For us, that would be fatal. For them, that's what keeps them alive, thanks to their Coelosaurian and Theropodian ancestors in the Triassic. And so feed them. So make sure they have food at all times. Access to their feed. Now, you don't need to give them too many treats. A lot of people are like, well, should I give them fresh oatmeal, warm oatmeal? No, 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 no. What that does is that actually dilutes their nutrition. And I'm going to go into another spiel on that a little bit later. There is a flock block that I will make for my chickens. It's actually going to be one of the next videos I do, is this flock block that I make for chickens for my flock, simply as a boredom buster. So a lot of times when we have winter storms coming in, you know, we kind of got to keep our chickens, you know, cooped up. It's where that phrase comes from. And while they're cooped up, they can get a little bit bored. And so what I'll do is I'll make them some boredom busters. So this does not supplement their diet in any way. It gives them something to peck at, something to do to pass the time, so that way they're not pecking at their fellow coop mate. So it kind of focuses their pecking, their natural pecking instinct to something that's constructive versus destructive. And I make these myself, so yeah, you can buy them at farm and feed stores, but they're generally going to be huge and they're going to be very expensive. And so what I have done is I have done some research and I have come up with a recipe that I make for my own chickens, and I will share that with you guys here in one of the next videos that I do. I'll make that and I'll go through the ingredients list and show you how to make that for your flock. But that's a little boredom buster that I do. But that, again, that's not meant to supplement their diet. You don't want to supplement their diet. You want them to get their nutrition from their feed, especially in times when they're having, you know, we have like a polar vortex, I guess is what they call them, that'll come through and sweep through part of the nation or your area. And that cold temperature, I know you're kind of, once again, I've got to go back to the piece of advice I wish I had, which is, the worst mistake that a chicken keeper can make is judging the flock's comfort by their own. Yes, when it's cold outside, hot chocolate, hot coffee, hot tea, soup, bring it on, right? Sorry, I'm still getting over COVID. But with chickens, hang on. But with chickens, once again, that's actually going to be detrimental. Because in order to stoke their furnaces, they need high calories, and those high calories are provided in their feed. They have a very high metabolism in order to keep their, you know, internal endothermic temperature that high. So, oh my gosh, sorry about this. So yeah, you don't want to supplement their diet with what we would call creature comforts. No, they don't need warm oatmeal. They don't need anything like that. In fact, that's actually going to dilute the nutrition that they need in order to keep their furnaces running, in order to keep that warm air next to their body, in order to survive the harsh winter conditions. Now, if we're expecting a winter storm, that could be, you know, pretty nasty, where I can't let my chickens out because I normally let them free range every day, unless we have, you know, bird flu, severe, you know, weather coming in, or a predator scare. Then at that point I'm going to keep them on lockdown. And they're in there and they're bored. They're used to being out hunting and pecking, and so what are they going to do? They're going to peck their neighbor, and then yeah. So when I'm forced to keep them cooped up, I will provide boredom busters for them in order to keep them entertained. But as a general rule, that's only when I'm actually forced to keep them inside. So, but that'll be a video following, but this video was just overwintering. So I hope I have, well, I think I've kind of explained this and the reasons of why I was doing what I was doing the other day and wrapping my coop, and talked a little bit of the chickens' physiology and what really is what they need, which is keep it simple. And the chickens, they pretty much do the rest. So if you can give them a clean, dry environment where they have plenty of feed, plenty of water, they can keep their furnaces stoked, that way they can keep that warmth next to their body, they do the rest. So quite honestly, the best thing you can do to winterize your chickens is wrap your coop in plastic that provides both the moisture and a wind barrier. Do not include supplemental heat of any kind. Give them food, give them water, and let nature do the rest. These animals have evolved to live outside, all the way going back to the Jurassic Coelophysis, their Coelosaurian theropodian ancestors. They evolved to live outside. Don't judge the level of the flock's comfort by your own. That is the worst mistake you can make. So if you're thinking about, oh, I need to do this, I need to do that, you need to ask yourself, am I judging their comfort by my own. And there's a lot of other information out there. I've read it, I know about it. People will often contact me and say, hey, I read this article, what's your opinion? And my opinion is going to be, keep it simple, keep it practical, and make it easy for both you, your cleaning, and also easy for the chickens. So now, can you free range your chickens during the winter? Yes, I free range mine during the winter. And when they have a place to come to, so their coop, their pen that's wrapped in plastic, if they find that they're outside, they're pecking around and the wind is just a little too bitter and a little too brisk, what they'll do is they'll go back into the pen. So when they know that they can go to a place that is protected, a place where they can find comfort in the fact that they will be out of the wind, they will be out of the precipitation, they can then start judging their own comfort level. So you're going to have some that are just not afraid of anything. They're just the daredevils, and they'll go out there and they'll peck around and they'll be like, "Brr, it's cold out here." So they're going to go back into the pen where they're comfortable. So as long as they know that they have that place to go to, they can then, sorry, my voice is going. They can then judge their comfort level about how much time they can spend outside before they start getting a little too chilly, and then they'll come inside with that pen that's protected from the wind and the moisture, kind of warm up, get something to eat, get something to drink, and then go back outside. So yes, you can free range your flock during the winter. I free range mine every single day that I'm able to. The only time I don't is when we have a severe weather coming in, either a severe thunderstorm or, you know, a winter storm. When we have a predator scare, you know, I've seen a couple hawks fly around, or I've heard report if there's a fox or a coyote on the prowl, I'll keep them locked up. And the only other time I keep them locked up is when there's bird flu. And I will do a video on the bird flu and just how I manage that and how I respond to a bird flu. Yes, there's a lot of sensationalism around the bird flu, but the practical steps a backyard chicken keeper can take to protect yourself and also your flock, that's a video for another time. So anyway, I hope I have, my voice is going, I'm sorry. I hope I have answered a lot of these questions, brought forth some information that hopefully is new and is helpful to you guys. Again, my name is Noelle. I'm a backyard chicken keeper. I'm a writer. I'm a blogger. I work from home. I'm a professional writer. And I have been working actively within the backyard chicken movement for the past 12 years. So I've got a little, you know, I got a couple, a decade or so of experience underneath my wing. For those that are new, hi, it's nice to meet you. I will also link my blog to the description of this video, so you can read a lot of the information I've got there, and also the video that I did earlier on the flock. So I'm sorry, the flock, wrapping my coop for my flock. I'll link that. You can go back and watch that. And for those that have been following me, you know, since day one, I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate you. It's your views and your involvement within the backyard chicken community that helps me do the work that I do. You know, is the procreation and the conservation of heritage breeds, activating or an activist for roosters. So a lot of cities don't allow roosters to be within the city limits, but yet your neighbor can have a dog that barks all night. That's not exactly fair. So I kind of work within the system as far as advocating for roosters in the city or backyard chicken environment. And I'm also an activist on helping chickens achieve pet status, which would then give a lot more resources to the backyard chicken keeper. So these are the soapbox topics that I do a lot of work in within the backyard chicken movement, in addition to helping others who are just coming on board and just help, you know, navigate these somewhat trickery and somewhat isolating waters, which is, you know, the exact hole that I saw and I am attempting to fill with information and resources. So anyway, I think I'm going to cut this video off here because I don't think my voice is going to hold out much longer. I'm recovering from COVID, so it comes and goes. So I just want to thank you guys, and I'll catch you later. Bye.